This is BBC News, I'm Gavin Gray. Our top stories. British police hunt for more potential suspects after a teenager was arrested in connection with the London tube bomb. The UN calls for an investigation into the killing of 37 Burundian refugees in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Bangladesh imposes sweeping new restrictions on 400,000 Rohingya Muslim refugees, stopping them from travelling once they enter the country. A big boxing showdown in Las Vegas. Mexico's Canelo Alvarez takes on Kazakhstan's Gennady Golovkin, who will be the true middleweight champion of the world. Also in the programme, President Trump's supporters rally in Washington to defend what they consider to be American values. Hello. In the UK, counter-terrorism police investigating the tube attack in West London say they're keeping an open mind on whether more than one person was involved. An 18-year-old man suspected of planting the homemade bomb, which injured 30 people, was arrested on Saturday at the port of Dover. A house belonging to an elderly couple who have fostered several children is being searched. Andy Moore reports.
On a Saturday afternoon in a London suburb, people looked out of their windows to find heavily armed counter-terror officers in their alleyways and streets. Many residents were evacuated as the police operation continued. The centre of their attention was the home of an elderly couple who'd fostered hundreds of youngsters over the years. In 2010, Penny and Ron Jones were both awarded the MBE by the Queen for their services to children. In an online interview, Mrs. Jones said they had recently started fostering refugee children, including some from Syria and Iraq. The search in Sunbury followed the arrest of an 18-year-old man at the port of Dover. Police said it was a significant breakthrough.
At this stage, we're keeping an open mind around whether more than one person is responsible for the attack. And we are still pursuing numerous lines of inquiry and at great pace.
The device that failed to go off on the tube was made with homemade explosives and, it's believed, was packed with metal fragments. It was similar to the bomb used in the Manchester Arena attack.
We will have to make sure that we take all steps we can to ensure that the sort of materials that this man was able to collect become more and more difficult to combine together. We will always learn from these sort of incidents.
While the investigation continues, the UK terror threat remains for the time being at critical, its highest level. Andy Moore, BBC News.
The United Nations has called for an investigation into the killing of Burundian refugees in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The UN force in Congo says Congolese security forces shot dead 37 refugees and injured 117 others. It said one soldier was killed in the incident, which began when the refugees protested against the expulsion of 4 Burundians from the country. Andrew Plant reports.
The bodies of Burundian refugees, apparently killed when security forces opened fire, officials in the Democratic Republic of Congo say the refugees were attempting to break into a secure compound. This camp, just a few miles from the border of Burundi, now home to thousands who fled outbreaks of violence in their country, which erupted there more than 2 years ago.
The security forces in the Democratic Republic of Congo threaten to kill us in case we do not want to return home to Burundi. Justice must be done.
Many more have been injured in the violence at the camp, basic medical care given at the side of the road. Opponents of Burundi's president, Pierre Nkurunziza, say his move to stay in office for a third term in 2015 was illegal. The clashes that followed caused tens of thousands to flee. Opposition rallies crushed, with rumours of abductions and torture. In France, regular demonstrations are taking place to try to draw international attention to Burundi and a situation that many say could escalate into civil war.
There are people dying every day in Burundi and they close their eyes. So perhaps we're here to move them a little, perhaps to open their eyes they're trying to close. It's very, very hard.
The government says the people killed were members of an armed group who had attacked an office of the National Intelligence Agency. The UN Refugee Agency has called for a full investigation and has sent medical teams to help treat more than 100 who've been injured. Andrew Plant, BBC News.
To Bangladesh now, where the government is planning to build a giant camp for the 400,000 ethnic Rohingyas who fled from neighbouring Myanmar. The government says it will also impose restrictions on the movement of the Rohingyas in order to prevent them from settling in other parts of the country. Our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head has the latest from Cox's Bazar.
When they first started crossing the border 3 weeks ago, Bangladesh said it would send the fleeing Rohingyas back. With 400,000 already here from previous outbreaks of violence, the government believed it could not take any more. But the unprecedented surge in numbers of Rohingyas has forced Bangladesh to reconsider. It now wants to build a vast camp adjoining an existing one in which it hopes to accommodate all 400,000 of the new arrivals. The police say they will also enforce restrictions barring the Rohingyas from moving elsewhere. There are questions, though, over how fast this can happen. The displaced Rohingyas are in desperate need of the most basic aid. They are in many cases sleeping in the open with no sanitation or water supplies. Until now, the UN Refugee Agency has been restricted to the relatively small numbers, around 70,000, living in official camps. UN officials hope that the government will now consider a wider role for various UN agencies so that a full-scale relief effort can be organised. Jonathan Head, BBC News, Cox's Bazar.
A demonstration has been held in central Barcelona in support of over 700 Catalan mayors who backed a referendum on regional independence. The leaders have been summoned by Spain's public prosecutor and will be arrested if they don't answer the summons. Here's our Europe regional editor, Danny Eberhard.
We will vote. The chant from 700 mayors and their supporters gathered inside the Gothic courtyard of Catalonia's Palace of Government. They'd come to the administrative heart of old Barcelona. There they were met by crowds waving the pro-independence flag and were received by both the city's own mayor and the region's president. Those in Madrid's sights hammered home messages of defiance.
We're sure that we won't be cowed. We won't remain still. We'll do everything necessary so that our people, the people we see every day, can exercise democracy and can vote. Long live Catalonia.
The Spanish government's dilemma? How to stop a referendum that polls suggest a clear majority of Catalans want, even as they indicate that the odds are against independence. Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has vowed to thwart what he's called an intolerable act of disobedience, but come down too heavily and it risks playing into the hands of the secessionists. The dilemma for the Catalan authorities? How to stage such a referendum in the face of Madrid's implacable opposition. This goes beyond legal threats and efforts to seize election materials. Madrid looks set to take control of the region's finances next week. The referendum is planned for October the 1st, 2 weeks away. So far, neither side is backing down. Danny Eberhard, BBC News.
Supporters of President Trump held a rally on the National Mall in Washington to defend what they consider to be American values. And we went to speak to some of those taking part to find out what they feel are the most important issues facing their country.
The Patriot movement has been so excited to have a celebration of this type, to come out here on the mall. You know, we elected Donald Trump. We're very happy with that.
The value I think most under threat is the unity of the country.
I think the American value that is most under threat is liberty itself.
Freedom of speech.
How you doing? You holding it down? See, I love these people. I ran a music store in Chicago, and because we were Trump supporters, we were bullied, we were threatened, we received death threats. So, all to quiet our speech. So it's not the government quieting the speech. The government's out here protecting. You see the DC police, they're out here protecting our right for free speech. It's the value of free speech that's under assault here.
The values is to keep people together, keep them working, try to get our country strong again and united.
The value of respecting one another's opinion.
Well, I think Americanism is under threat.
All youngsters, if you want to come up here and participate in the Pledge of Allegiance, come on up. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The views of supporters of President Trump there at a rally in Washington this weekend. Europe's biggest airline, Ryanair, says it's cancelling up to 50 flights a day for the next 6 weeks. The move could affect nearly 300,000 passengers who will be offered alternative flights or refunds. Many have complained about the short notice of the cancellations. Our business correspondent Joe Lynham reports.
It's Europe's busiest airline, but it's grounding hundreds of its own planes. In doing so, it's ruining holidays for thousands of its own customers, some of whom are now stranded overseas. Carrie-Anne Woodgate is in Wrocław in Poland and was emailed by Ryanair.
Next flight out of Wrocław to Newcastle is next Thursday. We can't get through to anybody on Ryanair. We can't get through to a manager. Live chat doesn't work. The app doesn't work. If you do ring Ryanair on customer services, all we get is we're having a very large volume of calls. You betcha.
Others have had to cancel their holidays.
They text me the evening before the morning I was supposed to fly out. So, yeah, pretty disappointed. Lost a holiday out of it and lost some money as well.
Ryanair says that air traffic control issues and the weather, as well as a surge in pilots and cabin crew taking their holidays, is forcing it to ground up to 50 flights a day until the end of October. But that's still only 2% of the airline's entire flight schedule. But passengers set to fly with Ryanair in the coming weeks simply don't know whether their flight will actually take off. It could be cancelled right up to the moment they arrive in the airport.
The spin that Ryanair is putting on this is saying we want to make our timekeeping better, so therefore we're putting more planes on the ground in case something goes wrong. I must say, from the passenger's perspective, someone like me who's got a booking on Ryanair in the next few weeks, that looks like total tosh. Basically, it's a massive administrative foul-up. All their cabin crew and pilots are taking holiday before the end of the year.
So what could you get back if you're affected? Well, EU rules say you're entitled to a new flight or full compensation if your flight is cancelled. The airline also has to cover your food and accommodation if you're stranded, and it should offer to pay for a flight with a rival airline if it can't get you on another flight to your final destination. All this means that these cancellations could cost Ryanair's enigmatic boss Michael O'Leary up to £100 million. It's difficult to put a price, though, on damage to the airline's reputation. Joe Lynham, BBC News.
Boxing, and it's been described by some as the fight of the decade, the middleweight bout between Mexico's Canelo Alvarez and Kazakhstan's Gennady Golovkin. Well, it certainly lived up to the expectations because it ended in a draw. The two men couldn't be separated after 12 bouts of intense and physical boxing. Alvarez started strongly, but Golovkin responded with some fierce jabs. And since it ended in a tie, the Kazakh fighter will retain his 3 belts. All the speculation will now be over a potential rematch. Stay with us here on BBC News because still to come.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast.
Ancient meets modern. We'll tell you about the kung fu robots of northern China.
30 hours after the earthquake that devastated Mexico City, rescue teams still have no idea just how many people have died.
Well, there is people alive and there is people not alive.
We just can help and give whatever we got.
It looked as though they had come to fight a war, but their mission is to bring peace to East Timor, and nowhere on earth needs it more badly.
The government's case is being forcefully presented by Monsieur Badinter, the Justice Minister. He's campaigned vigorously for abolition, having once witnessed one of his clients being executed.
Elizabeth Seton spent much of her time at this grotto, and every year hundreds of pilgrimages are made here. Now that she's become a saint, it's expected that this area will be inundated with tourists. The mayor and local businessmen regard the anticipated boom as yet another blessing of St. Elizabeth.
This is BBC News. These are the latest headlines. Police have arrested an 18-year-old man on suspicion of a terror offence following Friday's bombing on a London tube train. And the United Nations has called for an investigation into the killing of 37 Burundian refugees in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The executive director of the World Food Programme, David Beasley, has warned the world needs to be better prepared for events at the scale of Hurricane Irma. In an interview with the BBC during a visit to Cuba, he said governments around the world had to be better equipped for the impact of climate change. From Havana, Will Grant reports.
Cuba was hit in many different ways. You're talking about, 100 and something thousand acres of land damaged, impacted agriculturally because of the surge of the water that has destroyed crops. Now, one of the questions now is how will it impact the growing season because of the salinity of the soil now? So a huge issue there. Hospitals, thousands upon thousands of homes. Schools, we know of over 1,000 schools out of the 10,000 schools that have been dramatically impacted. Electricity, the highways, just complete devastation in so many ways. Tourism, which is a major part of the economy here, has been impacted. But having said all that, I literally have been extraordinarily impressed with the resilience of the people here, the government, how they're responding and reacting. It is amazing.
A lot of people have criticised the response of certain European governments to the smaller Caribbean islands and the disaster relief needed after Hurricane Irma there. Would you add your voice to those criticising?
Well, we call upon all the governments that are involved with islands in the Caribbean to do as much as they possibly can. A hurricane of this size and this nature, it caught a lot of people off guard. This is a tragic hurricane. And I think the lesson from it is to realize that these hurricanes, this might be a sign of things to come, and therefore we all should be better prepared in the future.
And what lessons need to be learned after this experience?
There's a lot of issues that need to be addressed. I know when I was governor, for example, of South Carolina, we worked with the local authorities on building codes. How do you build buildings and structures more resilient to higher winds? But then that gets into who's got the assets or the amount of money to do these things. So it's not such an easy thing. But one thing that we can do is be adequately prepositioned when these disasters do occur.
David Beasley there from the World Food Programme. Let's have a look at some news in brief now. And Hamas says it's ready to hold talks with the rival Palestinian Fatah movement in order to pave the way for general elections in Gaza. President Mahmoud Abbas's Palestine Authority, controlled by Fatah, fought a war with Hamas over Gaza in 2007, which led to Hamas taking over the territory. And police in the US fired tear gas and rubber bullets during clashes with protesters in St. Louis earlier on Saturday, after a white former policeman was acquitted of murdering a black suspect. A peaceful rally over Friday's not guilty verdict turned violent after police confronted a group of demonstrators. 3 years ago, Prince Harry founded the Invictus Games, an international sports event for wounded service personnel. And next week, 90 competitors, the UK's biggest team yet, will take part in the Games in Canada. Para-athlete Steve Brown, a former wheelchair rugby captain, has been to meet a fellow athlete who's determined not to let a life-changing injury hold him back.
Yeah, obviously that was the vehicle where I was on patrol, and there's my seat there, and obviously I was found a good 20-30 feet away, face down. with obviously the amount of injuries that I had, but life goes on. I'm still here, still moving, still getting on with life.
Stuart Robinson graduated from the RAF one day after his 18th birthday. He proudly served his country in Northern Ireland, Iraq and Afghanistan. However, Stuart's life was changed forever when his vehicle drove over an improvised explosive device, or IED, while on a routine patrol near Camp Bastion in Helmand Province in 2013.
My only overriding memory of that whole time was the fact that because I could open my eyes and because I could still see, I was still alive.
And that moment that your wife and yourself locked eyes, there must have been quite a moment for her as much as you.
She knew that, even then when she saw me for the first time in hospital, that despite the number of injuries and the number of limbs that I was missing at the time, that she knew it was me. And I've managed to take the first step and get out of hospital. I'm up and about walking. Let's now push on, try things and try and get involved in sport now, and obviously using the Invictus Games as a massive tool to get me on that road. Yeah.
It's a process I know well. After I was injured 13 years ago, I was introduced to wheelchair rugby and eventually captained the GB Paralympic team at London 2012. It's crazy to think that you watched me play at 2012 as captain, and now you're there, Invictus Games captain, going on for your second captaincy as well, pal.
I know, yeah. If only we'd have known back then what happened. But like I said, it was great to watch you guys play, and obviously, I think maybe a little bit subconsciously it might have kick-started that fire within to play the sport, and obviously, just difficult circumstances led to actually playing it.
More than 300 people applied to join the UK squad. That's the biggest number since Prince Harry founded the Games in 2014.
I think 2014 was a really exciting opportunity. We had no idea what Invictus was going to be, what the outcomes would be, and how it was going to grow. And I think what we've seen over the last kind of 3 years to bring us to 2017 is such a public appetite for what we're doing and such an interest from the guys and girls, and a really positive recovery impact.
Stuart was part of the team that won bronze last year in Orlando. Now he has the chance to serve his country again, and he wants to do even better.
The British supermodel Kate Moss has been heckled by hundreds of anti-fur protesters outside a fashion show in London. Police were forced to form a human chain to allow celebrity guests to enter the building where Burberry was hosting a London Fashion Week event. Protesters chanting "Shame on Burberry" had blocked the road. In Australia, a koala has been released back into the wild after enduring a 16-kilometre nightmare, clinging onto the axle of a four-wheel drive vehicle. Incredibly, she was unharmed, as Tom Donkin reports.
How much can a koala bear? Well, quite a lot, it seems. This koala in Australia's southern city of Adelaide had to hang on for dear life to the axle of a moving car for 16 frightening kilometres. The curious marsupial had snuck behind the wheel of a parked car, which took off with her still inside. It was only when the driver heard the panicked cries of this inadvertent stowaway that help was called.
I've never seen anything like that, and it's absolutely incredible. She was crying a little bit, she was a little bit shaken, she was certainly in shock, but I rushed her straight to the vet.
Rescuers had to remove the wheel of this four-wheel drive to free the animal. Luckily, apart from some burnt fur, no real harm was done. After a period of rest, she was taken far away from traffic and back to the trees, happy to put the brakes on her driving days. Tom Donkin, BBC News.
And China is a country that's advancing at an extraordinary pace. But it seems some people in the country have discovered a way to combine the past with the future. The BBC's Tom Ullman explains.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning.
It is an ancient martial art. a study that requires patience and discipline. But in China, even the robots do kung fu. More than 1,000 of them, in fact, lined up at the opening ceremony of this competition in Harbin. Hundreds of teams trying to come up with the most amazing technological marvels. It's not just robots. What about a wheelchair that responds to brainwaves and the slightest movement of the head? Or this, a remote-controlled robot that can swim.
We held this competition with an important aim of finding talent, especially those who explore robot innovation and entrepreneurship.
The organisers hope this sort of innovation could help transform the economy, one kung fu robot at a time. Tim Allman, BBC News.
I'm not convinced. This is BBC News.
Hello there. The second half of the weekend should bring us a pretty decent day across most parts of the country. It could be quite a chilly start to the day. Sunday morning we'll have a bit of mistiness around, but later on there'll be some sunshine around and a few showers, but not as many showers as we had on Saturday, and not as heavy as they were either. We've still got low pressure sitting out to the east of the UK. Higher pressure, though, moving in from the southwest from the Atlantic, and that leaves us with a bit of a cool northerly breeze, particularly for eastern Scotland and northeast England too. Now you'll see through Sunday morning most of the showers will be concentrated across southern England, whereas further north across the rest of the country it's a quieter picture. One or two heavy showers down towards the Channel Isles where there could be a rumble of thunder, and a few of those showers just sitting off the south coast up towards East Anglia. But inland most places dry with clear spells. One or two patches of mist around first thing too across England and Wales. Perhaps a chance of an isolated shower for northeast England, but for much of Northern Ireland and Scotland you start the day on that dry, bright note. But it certainly is quite a chilly morning, although things will warm up relatively quickly once the sun gets going. Still quite a cool breeze though across parts of eastern Scotland and northeast England, which could drive in a few isolated showers. Most places staying dry for a good part of the day, but you'll notice during Sunday afternoon a rash of showers developing. Now they'll be really hit and miss, so for many parts of the country you'll avoid the showers altogether, particularly the further north and west you are, but we could see one or two showers towards the east. If you do catch one, it should be passing through relatively quickly. Now during a Sunday evening then, any of those isolated showers largely fade away, leaving us with a mainly dry night. But you will notice that breeze continuing around the east coast of England, drawing in one or two showers off the North Sea. But with clear skies and light winds elsewhere, a cold night. By first thing Monday morning, in the more rural spots, we could see temperatures getting just a few degrees above freezing. So certainly a cool start to the new working week. Now during Monday, low pressure still sitting to the east of the UK, high pressure in the west. So that's going to bring largely dry weather across many parts of the country, I think, on Monday. But with that northerly breeze feeding in once again, that could bring a few showers to eastern Scotland and eastern England. Further inland, one or two isolated rogue showers cropping up, but many of us avoiding the showers. So a lot of dry and bright weather. Temperatures of 17 or 18 degrees in the south, but cooler for the likes of Newcastle and Aberdeen too. Into Tuesday and Wednesday, a bit of rain for the middle of the week, but those temperatures are on the rise. Bye for now.
A book can lead us to new worlds and experiences. But how can the words take us back to the ideas that brought it into being? How can the book guide us to the one who gave it shape and character? How can it show us the inspiration? Learn more about the book. Discover the writer who created it. We'll introduce you on Meet the Author, Thursday